A lot of people have watched the movie Straight Outta Compton, and they're thinking that this is all hip hop has to be. And what I fear is that this film is turning out to be part of a plan to revise the history of hip hop and omit major details regarding the history and culture of hip hop. And when I look at the movie Straight Outta Compton, it presents one viewpoint of what hip hop was. And a lot of people were saying that, oh, the NWA were street reporters. No, they were not the original street reporters. The original street reporters came out when hip hop first started in the mid 1970s with Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and they came out with the song "The Message," and the message was talking about what was going on in the community, what was going on in the ghetto, and what happens when people live life in the inner city. And they wanted to send that message out because no one was talking about it in mainstream media. They felt like their voices weren't being heard. And the roots of rap, which came up in the South Bronx, was created to present a positive image of what black people represented. People like your Cool Hercs, your Africa Bombadas, your Cool Modis, and many others back in the day wanted to present a positive image of African Americans and African American culture, and they came up with the concept of rhythm and poetry, which was rap. And then rap, evolved into hip hop, and other street reporters came up, like your Just Ice, your KRS-One, and many others, and they also were reporting what was going on in the streets and what was going on out here. And again, while they were reporting what was going on in the streets, they also wanted to present a positive image of what black people were. They wanted to be role models for people in the community. What a lot of people don't understand is that, when it came down to the NWA, they spun it like they were street reporters, but these guys were actually originally gang members and dope dealers. So they weren't really about promoting the message. And what happened was they were about promoting a narrative that white liberals wanted to sell. Because if we look at, in contrast of your NWA on the West Coast, we had Stanley Kirk Burrell, also known as MC Hammer, out here, and he was doing his own rap thing. He had just came out the military, and he had been doing rap for a couple of years. I remember seeing him debut in the late 1980s, before the You Can't Touch This, when he did Turn This Mother Out, They Put Me in the Mix, and other songs. And he was also promoting a positive image of hip hop. Now, if you want to talk about West Coast street reporters, Ice-T was a street reporter, and he was talking about things that were going on in the street, but he was also, trying to be somewhat positive. What was happening with this NWA, this was about taking control of the narrative of hip hop. And that's what NWA was really all about. It was about taking away the narrative of hip hop from black people and making it to fit the narrative of white liberals. Because if we understand, hip hop before NWA, and if you were around to see hip hop before NWA, you would see that most of the hip hop produced by African Americans was pretty much positive, and it was pretty much about talk. You had a diversity of performers. You had your lyricists like your LL Cool J, your Big Daddy Kane, and your Heavy D's and your Cool G raps on one side. You had your comedy rappers like your Kid and Play, and then you had your super serious rappers like your Rakim. He was also a lyricist, and you also had many other acts. You had your female rappers like your Queen Latifahs and your MC Lights, and then you had other guys like your Dougie Fresh, and then you had your entertainers like your Run DMC, and then later on you had your conscious rappers like your X Clans and many others, and there was a room for pretty much everybody to have their own style and form and make the rap their own way. But when we get to 1989, we start to see, sort of this NWA come out with this Straight Outta Compton, and then all of a sudden we go from this diverse narrative in hip hop where there's room for pretty much everybody to have their own style and their own unique way of rapping and telling their own stories and entertaining and educating, to this what I call a minstrel show where all we're talking about is selling dope, calling women B's and H's, and talking about crime. And that's what happened when your NWA came out. And then later on, about a year later, you had your Two Live Crew come in promoting hypersexualism and promoting the idea of black men just being these sexualized brutes on stage. And then what the Two Live Crew would do is they would, literally go out and have sex on stage with females from the audience, and they would also, call women B's and H's. And this was, I believe, part of a plan to change the narrative of hip hop. Again, the narrative of hip hop was always positive when it was controlled by African Americans. And and what happened was the liberal did not like the idea of black people talking about things like going to college, trying to build a life for themselves, talking about true black culture, talking about being responsible, talking about being conscientious, talking about being self-aware, talking about discovering their own identity. The white liberal didn't want that. He wanted the narrative of hip hop to fit his stereotypes. And if you look at your NWA and your Two Live Crew and your Tupac and many of the others, they fit the exact same narrative that the white liberal has been promoting regarding the African American narrative since the 1960s, when they came out with the TV show Julia. This Negro who comes from a single mother household, he's living in the streets, he has to go out here and commit crimes in order to make a living, and he needs a great white savior to come and clean him up and dust him off and make him a semblance of human. But when we look at old school hip hop before this narrative was pushed in, we saw the humanity of black people. We saw black people who were about promoting their own culture, promoting their own ideas about self, and promoting positive images of self. We saw black people reporting their news from their own viewpoint. And what the liberal didn't want to hear was news from our viewpoint. They did not like the ideas of a KRS-One or a Just Ice or many others like Public Enemy talking about what was going on. They wanted somebody who would fit their narrative. And they know that they could not compromise people like your KRS-Ones or your Just Ices or your Public Enemy. They know they couldn't get Chuck D to sell out. They knew they couldn't get KRS-One to sell out. They knew they couldn't get Just Ice to sell out. So they went out and found themselves an Ice Cube, an MC Ren, an Eazy-E, and they used those guys to promote their narrative and then call it street news. And because they used these guys to promote their narrative, they pretty much were able to take control over the narrative of hip-hop, because many African Americans, thinking that this was a new and unique sound, ran for it, thinking that, oh, these guys are real, they're talking about the real streets, when this, again, was not the case at all. This was about making hip-hop fit a certain narrative. This is about making hip-hop tell a certain story. And the story, again, they wanted to tell was the same story that they had been promoting since the 1960s. Negro men from single mother households who were not able to function in life, and again, needed that great white savior to clean them up. They did not like the narrative of old school rap, which promoted the idea that black men themselves could create their own art form, create their own music form, create their own narrative, create their own viewpoint, tell their own stories, present their own viewpoint to the world, and promote positive ideas of self to other black people. They did not like the idea of black people promoting the ideas of self to self. So they came in, brought in this NWA, brought in this Tupac, brought in many of these other dysfunctional rap acts, and wanted to promote them to push a narrative to black people that this was black life. Black life was the ghetto, black life was selling dope, black life was committing crimes, black life was calling women B's and H's. I mean, if you look at old school rap, there was never any push to call a woman a B or an H. In fact, in most old school rap songs, black women were pretty much respected and revered. I mean, that was a big core component of many of the old school rap songs. When you look at the new school rap songs created by post-NWA, there's this push to call the black woman a B, an H, and to say all sorts of things about her, and to promote a dysfunctional divide between black men and black women. When you look at old school rap, there's often, all about unity, and and many songs were about, getting the attention of women and winning the favor of women. But when we go to this NWA, the narrative is changed. And a lot of people, they're not looking at it, constructively, because they're looking at this one movie thinking that, oh, these guys were revolutionary. Yeah, they were revolutionary in compromising the message of hip-hop, compromising the viewpoint of hip-hop, and changing the narrative of hip-hop. They pretty much betrayed the black community. If you look at what narrative was being pushed in the late 1980s and 1990s regarding black people, you will see why these guys were pretty much sellouts to their own community. I mean, we had Bill Cosby trying to push a positive image of black people with shows like A Cosby Show and A Different World. We had hip-hop and rappers trying to push a positive image of black people out here. And then here comes the minstrel show known as the NWA, and the narrative starts to change, because when we look at West Coast, Ice-T and MC Hammer had a completely different sound. Ice-T was a street reporter. He was hardcore, and he was talking the news. And he was doing it in a way, that wasn't calling women B's and H's. And MC Hammer was an entertainer. He was promoting entertainment with songs like "Turn This Mother Out" and "Put Me in the New." They put me in the mix, and here's the news. He was putting on an entertainment style. And again, MC Hammer pretty much owned his own music. But when the NWA comes out, all of a sudden we have MC Hammer called an Uncle Tom and a sellout, when he pretty much made his own records and pushed and promoted his own records. This man went out and grinded and made his own business, but he's called an Uncle Tom and a sellout by a group of rappers who were pretty much created and promoted by white liberals. And that's, a lot of black people don't understand that. They look at the picture of hip-hop and they think MC Hammer's a sellout, but MC Hammer was self-made. But your NWA was pretty much made by white liberals. Same thing with your 2 Live Crew, was also made by white liberals. And they both promoted and perpetuated stereotypes that fit the narrative of the white liberal. Again, black brutes, black hypersexualism, all black misogyny. And these were not elements that were core when rap first came to fruition back on Creston Avenue in the South Bronx. Again, rap was always created to be positive. It was always about promoting a positive image of black people. And what a lot of people, they watch the movie and they think that this was, what the way it was, but there was nobody to put a counter or a contrast to it, to, talk about an Ice-T or an MC Hammer in that same area, or to even talk about the overall history of hip-hop as it related to the South Bronx and the roots of hip-hop that came from the South Bronx, and how we went from a diversity of rap acts, back in the late 80s, early 90s, all telling different stories and presenting different viewpoints, to post-NWA, here we have everything fitting one narrative. And that one narrative of hip-hop we have gotten over the last 25 years has pretty much, again, been one that pretty much parallels that of the narrative of the liberal from the 1960s, when they first created the Julia TV show. These Negro men who come from single mother households, these Negro men who have to live in the streets, these Negro men who pretty much go out here and they have to commit crimes, these Negro men who spout profanity and pretty much act a fool and, are pretty much ghetto and need some white savior to save them. And this narrative pretty much mirrors the exact same narrative that was being presented of black people by your Hollywood out in the 1930s, when we look at the stereotype images of your coons, of your black brutes, of your black Jezebels, of your Sambos, and other minstrel images. These images all pretty much follow the exact same narrative. But, sadly, many African Americans just can't connect the dots, and they can't see how their art form has been pretty much been hijacked by the same liberals who pretty much have been trying to control the image and media regarding black people. And sadly, they got control of it. And we look at the whole future of hip-hop, and it's gone from thugs to effeminate feminism, and there's now a push to perpetuate, a homosexualized image of black men in media. And the whole thing is that as long as this liberal controls the image of black people, you're not going to get a clear and concise picture of it. And you really have to understand that we have to control our media if we hope to get that positive and balanced image. Because when we controlled hip-hop, we got a completely different picture than what we have today. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.